Welcome to Sword and Shield, the official podcast of the 960th Cyberspace Wing. Join us for insight, knowledge, mentorship, and some fun as we discuss relevant topics in and around our wing. Please understand that the views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the U.S. Air Force nor the Air Force Reserve, and no endorsement of any particular person or business is ever intended.
Welcome to Sword and Shield Podcast, episode number 5. I'm Colonel Rick Erredge.
And I'm Chief Master Sgt. Chris Howard.
With us today, we have
Casey Erredge, 960th Cyberspace Wing, Key Spouse Mentor.
Thanks for joining us today, Casey.
You're welcome.
So today, we're really excited to have you, and we want to talk a little bit about the Key Spouse Mentor Program and some specific things that we feel like are important to getting out to some of our members in the wing. So can you tell us just a little bit about the Key Spouse Program in general, and maybe put some of those myths to rest? Because I know some of our unit members and their family members maybe have a preconceived notion of what the Key Spouse Program is and how they can participate in the unit.
So the Key Spouse Program is a commander's program that it's not a social club. A lot of folks think that it's just another spouses club, and that is definitely not what it is. We are Key Spouses are officially a part of the leadership team. We're here to support the families of the members of the 960th Cyberspace Wing. Through multiple different things. We disseminate information and support during crises.
Yeah, I know we had a situation with our when you're a key spouse in one of the units previously, and somebody was deployed, and the family member, late at night had a plumbing issue, and they thought to call you first.
Yeah, yep. We're here for anything to assist. We've had previously a spouse with that wasn't mowing the lawn because they were allergic to it, and their spouse was deployed, and they were getting nasty grams from the HOA, and just off the cuff mentioned it to somebody that was happening, and wham, we had somebody there that was mowing her yard for her to take the stress away. So trying to find ways to help families to relieve those stressors, whether their member is deployed or here even.
Yeah, I know this is a great program. I've seen it work quite well in a few other units. Are there any requirements to be a key spouse by chance?
There are no requirements to be a key spouse, except that you have a family member that is in the military. We actually have some key spouses that are civilians as well that don't have a military member.
Civilian employees.
This is civilian employees, yeah. They have to have access to the base. That they would not be able to, if they're just a civilian, they would not be able to participate in the program during work hours. They'd have to do it on their own time. But for the most part, it's just got to be someone that would like to help other family members or help family members of the folks within the unit.
How are we doing here in the wing? Across wing. I know we got a bunch of GSU units. It's been a little bit difficult to get some units involved. And what would you how are we doing, and how can we help them find a key spouse for their unit?
I think the key part is to get out there and chat with your members, and talk to them about how their family maybe could be involved. Someone in their family that might be interested could be involved in the program.
And it's not like they have to be a part of the, command team, like they're coming to work every day, right?
Right. It could be anybody, and actually, we'd love to have volunteers from those lieutenants or senior airmen, to get a diverse set of folks helping.
Right. So I think that diversity is one of those key pieces too. I know in a previous unit, one of our tech sergeants' wives became a key spouse, and then I know that in the past in some units that they've had males as the key spouse as well. I guess the question I have is how much interaction are you seeing from some of the male spouses?
Right now, we don't have a lot within the 960th Cyberspace Wing. We don't have a lot of interaction from the male spouses. We do have one unit that does have a male key spouse here at JBSA Lackland. He's former military and has stepped up to help his spouse's unit. But overall, he's the token male right now.
No, a little known fact is, back in 09 and 2010, I was a key spouse when I was a TR for a RegAF unit. It is kind of daunting, right? It does seem a little bit scary at first, but once you start to learn about the program and learn about some of the ins and outs, and it was still in its infancy back then, I think, more so than it is today. It wasn't as well structured as we see today. It wasn't as much training. And I went to be a key spouse both at Travis and at Scott. So I got to see a transition from no formal training of, hey, you're here, you're a key spouse, to where Scott had a much more formal program where they set you down, you got a binder, and produced a lot of good information. But the key points I remember then, and maybe you can help me with, is the importance of just being engaged. And I think those stories that you were saying were some good examples, right? So when an individual is deployed, how do we stay engaged with that spouse? When they first move to an area, how do we stay engaged with that spouse? And again, it's male or female, right? Because there's a lot of transition change that goes there. For instance, my wife now is a teacher, and having some of those interactions is very helpful when other spouses might be teachers or know what that process is for certification. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, ma'am.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we want as we mature the Wing Key Spouse program, that we want to make sure that we have the key spouses in those contacts interacting with folks as they are new to the unit and coming in and asking, are you a teacher? Are you a lawyer? Are you a nurse? Do you have some licensure issues? And we can help you on how that works in Texas or whatever state you happen to be in.
I know there's a number of initiatives right now from many different levels about what's going on to try to help our families and spouses specifically transitional. Recently, they created a key spouse PPP for if they're a civilian employee, they get pushed up on the list further to help them. Military spouses get hired for federal civilian employees. Are there any other initiatives right now that maybe are in the news or people are talking about?
So there is a military support initiative that's taking place since COVID started, and they offer it's through the Blue Star families, and they have a weekly survey to ask how your family is adapting and coping with the situation with COVID in place. They're talking about finances and education and healthcare, and they do town hall meetings like once a week on a different pain point. So they'll look at the pain points that come out of these weekly surveys, and then they'll kind of put some topics out that are related to that.
What other kind of pain points do you hear from families and spouses specifically about what they need help with?
So, as I haven't had a lot of contact with a lot of the families within the Cyberspace Wing here. We're kind of new and growing, and I don't have a lot of contact points. A couple that I have spoken with, it's primarily education and healthcare.
Yeah, those are pretty normal standard things, especially when we move as much and trying to make those. I know we personally have had struggles with kids' education and transition between all the states we've lived in the last 5 years.
Right. We talk about school records. We talk about what school districts, especially for anybody moving into the local area. I know in the reserves, it's not as prevalent, but it's still fairly prevalent based on the transitions of other military communities. And then, some easy things like who's a good pediatric dentist, right? And who's a good orthodontist? Who's not going to take you to the cleaners for an oil change? I mean, it seems like simple stuff, but I'll be honest with you. I just went looking for a car, and now I'm looking for some camping areas. And how do you interact with individuals and get that information? And then with COVID currently, how do I even have that simple conversation? So I think that some of these entities like the key spouse is key there, because if we have that communication already, then it might be just a quick call through a network, and who knows what you might find,
Right. And that's what I tell the folks a lot of times, is that I may not have the answers, but what I like to think is fairly well connected, where I know who I can call at different bases, and I can find the information. So I might not have the information, but I darn well will find it for you and help you get your issue solved, or your problems, your questions answered. So, and that's regardless of, even if you're at Scott, I've got a network of folks that I can get you an answer at Scott, if it pertains to you there, or if it's nationwide. We've got so many different resources and so many networks of people that the Key Spouse program has connected us with that family members might not know even exist.
Right.
So.
Yeah, there's so many. I kind of feel like I'm overwhelmed at sometimes with the amount of resources there. And so the Key Spouse is somebody that can maybe understand how to use all those resources and find information and be able to, feel comfortable sharing that in a way. So how do you normally communicate? How do you prefer to communicate with your Key Spouses and your family members?
So I have established a Facebook page, and when I primarily post a lot of JBSA stuff on it, because that's where we are. But I have set it up so that if I get information from other bases where our other units are, I can post that information there as well. So, and I post it. I don't just post JBSA stuff on there. There's a lot of nationwide things that I get that I'll post on there. For example, like scholarships. That's something that applies to anybody regardless of where they are. So I use Facebook a lot. I have created a group on AF Connect. We haven't had anybody show an interest in it yet, so there's I haven't posted anything there. But if folks are socially, they don't want to deal with the social media, that's definitely there is a group sitting there waiting for me to put out information to in AF Connect. I've tried to work on Instagram, because I know some of the younger ones like the Instagram, but Instagram and I are not seeing eye to eye on my name. And it tells me that the name is taken by somebody, which is me, but yet when I try to log in, it doesn't like me. So I'm still working on Instagram, trying to get a different to get another different.
And I know you do a lot of email too. You get a lot of email.
I get a lot of emails. I try not to send out so many emails and overload everybody's inboxes, but I will forward, if it's something urgent that comes out, I'll forward, something that's hot, short notice or whatever. I will send it to the email contacts that I have. I'll forward it to the Key Spouses that we have at units and ask them to forward it to the family members that they have contact information for.
Right. So I'm going to ask a little bit different question. We talk about that being a key resource for knowledge. How do we get that to really mesh at the unit level, right? So what's that relationship look like from a key spouse at a unit level? And how does that affect the airmen in that unit by chance?
So the way that it should work is that there's key spouses at the units. Now, not all of our units have key spouses, there's a handful that are without. They're getting support from either me or a local reserve entity or active duty entity. So they should be getting information. They should be, the key spouses should be working with the unit commanders. The unit commander should be forwarding information that either comes from me or the wing, and getting the information to those key spouses, and then the key spouses would disseminate the information to the spouses that they've been able to engage with.
Now, I know when I went to the wing commander course back in January that they brought in a command team, and the key spouse was part of the command team, and I think that's one way to kind of look at bringing that person in, making sure they're a critical, link and piece to the entire family as well.
Right. I know when I was when I was a first sergeant, as part of that triad, it was an additional leg within the triad. So now we were, instead of just 3 legs, now we have 4 legs. When we talk about the balance between family and the workload and civilian life, having that key spouse input and perspective, it was definitely key in some decisions, especially when we look at surge capacities, when we look at large issues. COVID's a good example, right? So when we go to tailor this out, make this decision, how do you think that's going to affect this population, i.e. the spouses and the families? I know when we were talking about surge capacity within different campaigns within the war, what does that look like to that family? What does that look like when we increase these deployments? What's that tail end? Because we'll get busy with doing the mission side of the house. We need to make sure that we have that other piece there to make sure we're wrapping it in. I know as a key spouse, that's where I came into play, and we were doing barbecues and picnics and making sure that we were engaged at the base level, so that we were constantly bringing those families in from our unit to make sure that they were getting things like free oil changes, making sure the lawns are taken care of, making sure that family wasn't forgotten during those periods. And I think that that's a very important part.
So I think it's another perspective. I've been in a unit before with a commander that hasn't had kids and, wanted to go 24/7 ops, and we're going to exercise, we're going to do all these things, and wasn't thinking about, dual spouse military folks, and is the child care center going to be open at 6:00 at night overnight? So I have a place to put my kids when we exercise, when we go 24/7. And so just having somebody there to say, hey, have you thought about, or what about this, is really helpful.
And the key spouse is a good liaison between the family members and the leadership. So like if the family members are having concerns, then they can go to the key spouse and talk to the key spouse about it, and then that key spouse in turn should be sharing those concerns with the unit leadership.
And it can be anonymous if you want to, I suppose. Right. Yeah, you can just bring it as a concern, and that way they don't have to worry about having their military member try to bring that, and they feel like there's maybe going to be some, retaliation or, put that military member in a bad light, when really it's just, some information is maybe not clear.
Right, data points, right? It's similar to how we've leveraged the happy or not. If we're just taking it as data points versus specific individual concerns, then now we have another piece of data pool, right? Well, I've got 6 or 7 different spouses asking, why are we not trimming down the office staff during COVID, right? Are we not putting ourselves in danger? Or, has the base addressed the CDC issues during the COVID? I have like 15 spouses asking about this. So I agree that that data point is definitely a key piece from a leadership perspective of making sure that you as a commander can make a decision with as much information as possible, so you can make the best decision at the time, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes too we rely on, at least I rely on Casey to push information from the organization to the base, to other base organizations. For instance, we got some information in COVID about, asking about the gyms, right? Hey, when are the gyms going to be available to family members? So she can take that to her contacts at whatever base and be able to bring a concern from the entire wing as well, not just inside the unit, but have some influence outside the unit into our environment to try to shape it for, what we feel like is something that's important to us and our family members.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, anything that we can do to help the community. I did have one other question too. It sounds like it's very time intensive at times, but what would you say is the time requirement for a brand new Key spouse to commit to this program?
So the primary time commitment is the training. The Key spouses, although they're volunteers, they are required to take training. So the initial training is approximately 6 hours. With COVID right now, they do have a virtual training available, so you can do it on your own time, at home on your own computer. You do have to arrange that with a local, I shouldn't say local because not everybody has a local Airman and Family Readiness Center, but you have to arrange it through an Airman and Family Readiness Center. And then at the end, you speak to one of their Key Spouse Program managers to ensure the training is complete. So that's the initial requirement. Then you have to go through, I think it's like monthly, at least annually you have suicide prevention training and sexual assault training that you have to do, and those are like an hour or two a piece. So for training, it's maybe 10 or 12 hours initially to get in, and then maybe another 10 hours like every year, because you've got to go, they like you to go through training every couple months just to sit in on some classes and get some refreshers. As far as the time commitment, once you're in and through the training, it's really up to you and your commander, and what the commander would like you to accomplish, and the time that you're able to give. And maybe you're not able to give a lot of time. I always like to tell somebody, if they're not comfortable doing it alone, find a buddy, and then they can split the time. If you've got two of you, then you can share the workload. And a lot of units, now I know there's some units that we have that deploy folks more than others, but definitely if you're one of those units that has a lot of deployments, it's good to have a buddy, because you could have 30, 40, 50 people deployed, and that's a lot for one person to stay in touch with all those families that in those units where there are a lot of deployments. Then I highly encourage more folks to maybe consider stepping up and being a resource for those families.
And certainly I think there's a lot of additional training that if somebody wants more, right, they can find more. And we're allowing our family members to come into a lot of our normal kind of training sessions that we're doing, especially virtually now too.
Right. And I know the Airman and Family Readiness Center at JBSA has offered, like the last refresher training they had for Key spouses, they invited any spouse to attend just to get in and share the knowledge that's being shared.
Yeah, it's really good. So this is your chance for a sales pitch. So if somebody out there is maybe on the fence, or somebody that's maybe just new and listening that hasn't really heard much about the Key Spouse program, what would you tell them? And two questions. One is why it's important. And the second one is how, if they want to.
So why it is important. To me, it's important because when I first came into the military, I was brought from Minnesota to Tucson and left alone.
You're welcome.
And I wasn't introduced to anyone. I didn't know anyone. This program didn't exist back then. And so this program didn't exist actually until we were about halfway through where we are currently. So I do it because I don't want someone else to feel kind of alone and not know anyone in a strange place like happened to me. So I do it to help hopefully let folks know that you might be in a strange place without your biological family, but we as a unit are a family, and I want them to make sure that they understand that they have a family in us. And how is talk to your member and ask them to get in touch with the commander, or just talk to the commander directly, or give me a call.
How would they contact you, and what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So you can call me. My cell is 651-336-1614. Can email me at 960cwkeyspouse@gmail.com.
Can they message you anywhere on the...
You could request to join the 960th Cyberspace Wing Families Facebook group, and join us there and contact me through that.
Through the Air Force Connect app as well, there's a opportunity to engage, I think, even through some of the chief.
Right.
You can use Ask Me a Question. I think there's a public affairs block there too about ask a question or share, and through the what do you call that? The family page on the Air Force Connect app as well.
Yeah, no, you can't.
That doesn't work.
No.
And there's always if we forget all of those things, and if we just don't find any of that, you can email or call us, and we'll put you in contact as well.
That's probably
and I think that key piece there is it can seem daunting, but the impact you have as a key spouse for the amount of work that's required is really a minimal amount of work for a maximum amount of impact, right? Mm-hmm. If you need that or want that to be that part of that family and be engaged, it's really not a lot of work. And when it comes down to it, when you start engaging with those families from a personal perspective, both as a provider, as a key spouse, and as a receiver, as a deployer, it can make a huge difference in a successful deployment and in a successful assignment as a whole. That family orientation, that family connection is just, it's what you talk about 10 and 15 years from now, not necessarily what happened in the office on Tuesday.
Right. Yeah, and just some personal satisfaction, being able to help people out, help a family out when they need it. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to have been here. Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody listening. And we'll see you next time.